Okay, so in case you missed it, Indeed has announced they're moving beyond traditional job boards to become a full-service recruiting agency. And we believe Chad and Cheese was the first to put this to people's attention. And since this strategic pivot unveiled at Indeed's March investor meeting, we just figured this will most likely redefine how we approach talent acquisition. So with the changes to paid and organic job listings, it's crucial to understand what's driving Indeed's transformation and how this impacts all of us. That's why I've invited some of the biggest industry veterans today to break down what this shift could mean for recruiters, staffing agencies, and employers alike. So I suggest we go around the room of industry veterans who explain and introduce ourselves, who we are, and why we find this shift and topic super interesting. And if no one has anything against it, I can go first. So my name is Sara, I'm the CMO of Adway, and we do automated social recruitment marketing to attract your most desired candidates on social media. And my main point of view, why I find this super interesting, is it's never been a more crucial time for agencies or employers to diversify their efforts for talent acquisition. And most likely, with my perspective, I'd say multi-channel on social media will future-proof how you attract talent. That's why I think this is super interesting. Chad, let's go. You're next.
Yeah, Chad Sowash, co-host, co-founder of Chad Cheese Podcast. It's fairly simple. I mean, this is not interesting at all from the standpoint of Indeed always wants money. They always want more money. So being able to expand the total addressable market just makes sense. They're owned by a staffing company, one of the biggest staffing companies in the world, and they don't really have a footprint in the US. Indeed is a footprint into the US, buying Sift and being able to turn that into Indeed Flex. So I think this literally, most of the industry just hasn't been, they haven't been paying attention. Now they're going to be forced to pay attention and actually do something about it, or just go ahead and cover themselves up and buy their next headstone.
Always to the point. Lieven, could you go next?
Hi, hello all. I'm Lieven Van Nieuwenhuyze, Chief Digital at House of HR. And House of HR is the holding above 54 companies, all active within recruitment. We have 4 billion revenue this year. It will be 4 billion. For us, recruitment is crucial, of course. So we make money when we can put people at work. Indeed used to be a very important channel to us. It's one of the biggest inflow channels. And they've always been part of a competitors group, or not always, but for years. So that was kind of annoying, but we learned to live with it. But with the recent move, things are going to change.
Great. And Jim, give us the background. Who are you in this space?
I'm Jim Durbin. I'm the principal of Responsible Recruitment Marketing, which is consulting for recruitment advertising. I tend to play with the campaigns and budgets, trying to figure out, hey, how do we get our jobs cheaper? How do we get more people? I'm also a features editor for the AIM group. So I've been writing a little bit, and really shocked that I missed all of this. Really proud of Chad for pulling that down. I have a little bit of a contrarian take. I think it's moving that way, but I want to know how. I don't see how it's going to grow the way I think some of us are doing it. But my question is going to focus around, how do they exactly plan to do this? Because it's a big deal. It's a big deal to actually move in. It hasn't been done before. So I'm a bit of a skeptic. I think there are bigger forces at play. They're going to stop them.
Ooh, bring the heat. Okay. And Viktor, who are you?
Yeah, I'm the co-founder of Adway. So I also spent my entire career trying to figure out the Indeed algorithm. So I bought a lot of ads. I made 2 HR tech companies in the past. I exited both big customers of Indeed, I would say. And today I'm also working with the big agencies. So they are part of my customers. So I know the stance they're taking behind the scenes. But as we discussed in the intro on this one, it's very few of them that actually want to go and be public about it just now. So something big is happening behind the scenes at the record store firms as well. But exactly how they're going to do it now, I don't know.
Okay, cool. So let's go. Open mic. What is this going to mean for our industry in recruitment? What do you think?
It's disruption. I mean, that's the beautiful part. And that's what we continue to need to evolve in the first place. So I see staffing companies looking toward vendors. And Lieven and I talked about this earlier this week on an episode that dropped Monday, where I mean, there are vendors that are out there that are point solutions, and really staffing needs an operating system. They're doing business like they've always done business for the most part. And not just because Lieven's on the call, but because we've actually seen what House of HR is doing. They're very progressive, but still, this was a blind spot for them. So even the most progressive, this is a blind spot for. Imagine all of those organizations like, I don't know, Randstad and Adecco, who thought they were too big to fail. This could be a huge problem, especially for EBITDA for those guys.
What's your take, Jim?
I think I'm going to back up a little bit, because I'm not convinced they're just going to drop staffing in. I don't think they can just turn on Indeed Flex and then turn on Indeed Hire, and all of a sudden now they're the largest staffing firm in the country, in the US. I don't think that's going to work, because first of all, these pilots have been running. What are they doing? Indeed Flex is cool for staffing, but for just shift scheduling. But the problem is, I keep coming back to what Chad pointed out. They're already the biggest in the space. At one point, they were 30-40% of all the remote the external hires for people in the US. They're absolutely the giant. There is no place to grow. And this is their first year of losing revenue. That's a big deal for them to grow all the way from $1 billion to $6 to $7, and now they're falling back. So obviously Chris Himes has some issues. He's got to find some way to do it. They gave over $1 billion to Recruit Holdings 2 years ago, and now they've lost more than that in revenue. So there has to be some place for them to go. I can't figure out, is this just something you tell investors where they nibble at the edges? Are they really going to go chase temporary staffing? Or are they, because they'll look at the levers they're talking about. Oh, we're going to do Indeed integrations. We're going to improve the UX for small business. Like that. You can't say we're moving into staffing and, oh, by the way, we're going to improve the UX for small business. It's like that's small ball versus giant strategy. So I can't tell if they're just buying some time. We've seen many CEOs do that. Right now, everybody's kind of frozen with the zero interest rates going away. The real question is, are they truly going to move into staffing? And if they do so, who's going to allow it? Because it's not like these rumors haven't been around. But a lot of companies are starting to slowly back away and not make them the sole source.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced at any point that they'll be able to just shake everybody else up and tell them what to do. And that's like the biggest entry we've seen. Indeed staffing. I mean, how big is Indeed Hire now? They're not that big.
No, Indeed. I mean, in this case, I mean, they're really focused on what it looks like is the $127 billion TAM around temp, right? So they're going to jump into temp with Sift. I don't think they're going to try to do all of it at once. There's no way they can eat this elephant at once. And a $127 billion elephant's pretty damn big in the first place. Yeah. But they have been running the Sift / Flex skunk works for a while. And yeah, this is definitely candy for the investors, but they do, as you'd said, and I think it's incredibly smart that they have hit, I think, the walls of their TAM, the current recruitment marketing TAM. They have to bust through those. And this is really their only route, not to mention, they're owned by Recruit Holdings. So I think you could see it coming fairly easily.
What would you add, Viktor?
Now, I would maybe put it in perspective to the stock price, right? So most of the big Rechinstaff firms wants to drive higher stock price. Not all of them are public, but most of them are. But they have been declining in the last 5 years. Almost all of them. But Recruit Holdings has gone up 5 years. Actually, this year they had really good stock price going up. So I guess on the board meetings of the big Rechinstaff firms, can they really justify of paying a really high price of buying their candidates through Indeed and no longer? Because it's not small investment, right? It's huge investments going into Indeed. So
every year,
I wonder if how the discussions goes around the board of directors, they could actually fuel recruits up anymore if they take in this stand. So
I think the most interesting thing is how are staffing companies going to react, right? And and so Lieven, your thoughts on that, because obviously you're a part of a huge staffing organization.
Well, we're bigger than some and smaller than others, but
you humble.
It's pretty big already. Well, Jim said about rumors being around for quite some time. That's a fact. But this time they actually went to the investors meeting and they recorded the whole talk, and I watched it, and it's pretty clear what they're planning to do. And if they don't mean business, then they took a huge risk, because our company is, of course, looking for alternatives, and I'm sure all the others are as well. They might be less open than we are about it, but you can't just go working with a company who's going to backstab you and who's going to steal your candidates just to fill in their own jobs, which is basically what they're doing. So I think if they don't mean business, they wouldn't have mentioned this, because they're going to lose so much revenue from the staffing company right now.
Right. The risk is too high.
Do we know how much revenue there is from the staffing industry back to Recruit? Does anyone know how big part of?
How big are you talking about the total TAM for recruiting, or?
No, total about how big the customer group of Indeed is in agencies.
Oh, geez. Yeah. No clue. It's got to be massive, though.
Yeah. So it's quite
They spend a lot.
bold move of.
No free traffic. They spend a lot.
Yeah.
I can understand like the business decision from Indeed maybe, but it's quite a bold move to be up against a huge part of their revenue, right?
I think they did give us clues to this. So if you look at the levers, you talked about 3 levers, right? What is it? We're going to increase our integrations with the ATS. We're going to fix some of the UX stuff, and then we're going to continue to improve at those edges. What we're hearing, not just from this, but also from LinkedIn and other places, is the idea of end-to-end. Just get rid of all recruiters. AI is going to solve everything. We're going to have end-to-end automation. No humans will ever talk to it. It's just going to be one super god TA leader with a bunch of virtual assistants doing all the work, and no humans will ever talk to another human. That's the pitch we're hearing from CEOs. We're going to slash 60% of recruiters. Nothing could possibly go wrong because end-to-end works perfectly. It never works like that. Gall's law won't allow that. You can't just insert that. So they're chasing shift and gig workers. But honestly, how many times in the HR tech industry have we seen people assume they understand how staffing works? And they have no clue. Temporary staffing is about having a small group of people, shaking their hands and saying, are you showing up tomorrow? I used to work for a very large agency that was same day. It was hourly workers. They'll work for a few days. As soon as they get money, they stop. Or they work for 3 months or for 6 months and they stop and they go do something else. The idea that you could just sign in and get those shifts perfectly, there's just too much disruption for that. Am I going to go work for Burger King for 6 days and I'm going to walk over and work at Abercrombie for the next? That's not how retail or restaurants or any of those places have ever worked. I know that CEOs want that, but that's not how temporary staffing works. That's how you end up with needles in the restrooms and people not showing up. It is hard work. It is a small group of people you're convincing to show up at the right places. And it is a finite audience. Unlike remote work, there's only a certain number of people can even get to your location, because a lot of times they don't have cars. These people switch cell phones every 3 months. How are you possibly going to gather contact information if they have different phones or they're using burner phones? I'm not sure that small shift companies have done very well. You could look at something like Vivian, how well they've done. You've got someone's, Winolo didn't do that great, but in a small one part of an area you can do well. How do you possibly scale that? And Indeed thinks they can scale that. I've yet to see a case study that survived a second city, much less an entire region that's been rolled out. That's what's scary about Flex is I can see how they think in their heads. It's the same game with startup people. I have 10 people paying $10,000. If I have 100 people, why that's a lot more money. That's what it feels like they're saying. I'm not sure they're going to get there.
No. What's your guys' take on, the discussion about traditional job boards often add limited value because many candidates they reach are already in a company's recruitment pipeline. So, this redundancy makes job boards less cost effective as employers pay to access candidates they could, engage throughout existing networks on other platforms. What's your standpoint here?
Just the job board side of the house?
Yeah, or in this case, like a giant database built since 2004.
Well, I think that's the big key. And there's no comparison between Winolo and Flex. You've got Indeed, who's spent billions of dollars in advertising, Super Bowl commercials, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They've built a huge database and they needed to find, in 2019, they did, Sift, to be able to start that whole skunkworks process around being able to build a TAM around, hourly types of workers and whatnot. So yeah, they're two entirely different animals. But I think, and I believe that one of the things that we're seeing with Indeed is that the general job boards are really taking a hit. The niche job boards are the ones who are actually making out. So they've bet on general and broad based. That worked for a while. Right now, cycle it's not. So they're forcing, or they've been forced to do something that I think that was on the roadmap in the first place. So yeah, I mean. You take a look at the monsters, the career builders, Indeeds. I mean, it seems like a life cycle to some extent.
What are the options, Lieven, your guys are looking on to diversify your channels for attracting candidates?
Well, the biggest one still was organic traffic, just through Google, search engine marketing. And now with AI coming up, we want to make sure that if someone asks ChatGPT, what's the best company to hire a legal profile in Belgium, we want to make sure Via Legis, for example, will be mentioned. So we're looking into large language model optimization, which is pretty new. I don't think anyone knows exactly how to do it.
LLMO.
Yeah, something like that.
LLMO.
We need to launch a new marketing discipline.
Yeah.
But it's trial and error, and it's very fun to do. So that's an important one. And then, of course, there's programmatics, which we're all experimenting with, but now we're going to upscale it probably. We have some other more secret things we're planning to launch. But we do have a plan B, and it was necessary. And in fact, I'm almost happy that Indeed just took the decision for us.
Yeah, they took a decision for the industry almost. Like forced the industry to get acting. Yeah.
I also think there needs to be a new thinking from a lot of companies, not only Rec and Staff, but they also need to think about conversion rates, right? So ATS system, and we know all about like the big ATS system is like horrible for conversion rates and all of that, but the big Rec and Staff firms have not looked into that one either, right? They just bought more traffic, more traffic, but if they turn around and they think about the experience from a candidate and making sure they like raise the conversion rate, they will get a lot of candidates for free just by doing it. And they will probably get even better candidates because the best candidates will probably not be that persistent of actually applying if there's a long form. So I think they will be forced into looking at all of this initiatives also with AI and LLMs and all of that as well to see if they can automate more of the process. So it's not only buying traffic from new sources, also like making sure you do something with the traffic you're getting today, because they have huge amount of traffic, the big Rec and Staff firms.
Yeah.
And another problem buying traffic from the same job boards over and over is that you're paying for the same candidates over and over again, right?
Yeah.
So probably like 60, 70, 80% of the candidates have already applied in the past.
Yeah.
And we've lived this before. If you were in digital marketing a decade ago, it was SEO and SEM, and then everybody started rebranding themselves as, no, we're conversion companies now. We're moving further down the sales funnel to provide more value to the companies, because programmatic is another word for fraud. I'm sorry. Advertising mistakes. And that's something that we haven't really had to play with as much yet. We don't get that all these ads that are running at 2 a.m. on your smart TV aren't being seen by anybody. We don't think about that kind of stuff because we haven't had the money, because we were so tight. We don't deal with $100 million budgets. We deal with $500,000 budgets.
Yeah.
We have seen a lot of this before, and it feels new to us. But as we get more sophisticated, so do the bad. And I think we're in a position where we got fake profiles that are issues. You've got a lot of ghosting that occurs when you do a fully automated system. There are a lot of people that don't show up, and some of those things are built into the system. If you have so many jobs, if you go to Indeed and you can apply in 8 seconds and you can get a job and you can start on Thursday, your boss says something mean to you, you go back, you quit your job, and you have another one the next Tuesday. That's one of the problems with an automated system. If you have a smaller group, that's why the niche job boards are doing so well. If you have a smaller group of people, they're not looking for 300 jobs. They're looking at maybe 10 or 30. It feels like scarcity. They're putting more time and attention into that job. I think that makes a big difference too. We're forgetting what the candidates are running into. So it's not just a matter of, I think definitely I think Chad and I both said this a bunch. I think we as an industry, I'm talking about the internal folks, like I'm coming from the director TA side, we've got to understand what's going on because we're just blindly saying, give me more traffic. The idea of less traffic, more quality is so far away from what anybody's thinking right now. But that's the reality. Across the world, there's less demographics, there's less candidates, there's more fraud, there's more people giving up. We've got to reach a point where we're converting more of that traffic. And that means that all three of us, the vendors, the job boards, the tech vendors, the job boards, and the staffing leaders have to begin to make changes. Otherwise, we have the chaos we have now where everybody's freaked out and nobody does anything. I think that's the bigger concern is everybody just kind of stops and says, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
You can't be doing that anymore. I don't think we're in a world where you can afford to do that anymore.
Yeah, I think that if leaders in TA were held responsible like leaders in sales and marketing, they'd be fired. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars, in billions in some cases, on these leads, these qualified marketing leads, and then they do nothing with them after, right? You've already qualified them even more, taking some of them through the interview process where you've got, silver and bronze medalists and, just a bevy of them. And then what do? We go back out and we pay for the same people again. We don't nurture. We don't continue to connect and to ensure that, we have robust profiles in the database. What do we say? Well, those are 6 months old. Well, that's your fault. We have data to be able to nudge, to be able to connect with, and to be able to be able to get those profiles where they need to be. So they're not 6 months to 18 months old. So, I've been challenging TA for years now. Stop doing business the way that you're doing business today. In staffing, in some cases, the same way. You've paid hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars for these candidates. Go there first. When I was at Randstad, we spent so much money on LinkedIn and Indeed that seats weren't even really used. It was ridiculous. So, the big question is, when and will staffing stop spending money on somebody who's trying to come and smother them in their sleep?
But why don't management push harder, or board of directors push harder than top down? Like, it should be quite easy to put demands, like you just said, same demands to TA that you do to sales and marketing. But how come they're not doing it?
We don't have the analytics. We have dirty data. HR is the dirtiest data out there. So when you try to look at it and explain to someone, I was talking to someone the other day and they made the comment that their best source of hire is LinkedIn. One out of every 4 candidates that apply to a job gets hired. I said, that's not true. He goes, no, it's true. I was like, it's not true. He's like, how do you know? I was like, it's just not possible. The physics, the multiverse, in all the multiverse, there's not a single place where that could be true. I said, here's what happened. You paid for 3-year contracts on LinkedIn, got a bunch of job slots. Your recruiters are bored. They're throwing jobs out there. They're cherry picking candidates and putting it into your ATS. You actually have thousands of candidates applying. You're counting the ones in your ATS as the applications because those are the only ones that are marked as LinkedIn. He goes, 25%. That's common because it's hard to go through that. ATSs aren't built for it. We're getting a lot better with those. But if they actually asked us, we don't have financial literacy in HR, which should be terrifying to folks. They tend to look at it just as operations, cutting cost, going faster. And we've got to get smarter about that. Sales and marketing has some pretty good tools. We have copies of those tools.
Yeah.
So we're getting better. There are some good ones out there. But when how many times do you have to have that conversation with people from very large companies where you're like, dude, take a single data course, understand what it actually means. That should be terrifying to you. If you think that's true, I don't even know what to say to someone like that anymore. Can't yell at them constantly. I don't have a podcast.
Use this forum. You mentioned something interesting on the podcast from yesterday, right? Where you said they Indeed is not only stealing candidates, but they're actually stealing the leads. And maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that one. Did I understand it correctly? That's easy for Indeed then to understand who's the end client, and by that going after the end client as well. Do you mean it by that, or?
Yeah, I think Lieven talked about obviously the stealing of the candidates, which I mean they've been doing for years, and everybody has been okay with it, right? I mean, hell, it was happening back in the monster days. You post something, and they build their database. Then Indeed came out, and they were the Google for jobs, so there was no resume database. It was straight through. We're just providing traffic to your site. Then magically one day they have a resume database. Now they have where you have to it's mandatory that you register into their database if you want to apply. So now they're building their database off of all the funds that direct companies and staffing companies have. You can see who those companies are. I mean, to try to find out what company is working with Adecco or Randstad or what have you, it's not that hard. It's a fairly easy basic search, which drives leads. Okay, now we can push those guys out of the way and go direct to the client and try to actually earn that business. And I think that was one of the things that Lieven was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like a dream CRM system then.
Yeah.
For them.
So your thoughts on that, Lieven? I mean, when it comes to how you guys have worked with them in the past, and then how do you see it happening in the future? Just a clear cut, or is this going to be kind of like weaning off of?
Kind of like what?
Weaning off of, just slowly transitioning away.
Yeah. It's the American slang. I still have problems with it. If things proceed as they seem to be proceeding, then it will be a hard shortcut, I think. For the reasons I already mentioned.
Yeah.
But I think in the end it will be a good thing. And I was just looking into, the tool maybe, or maybe you don't, the lazyapply.com, where people with one push on a button can apply for 1,000 jobs with a mail which was written for each specific job by AI, and then a resume which was rewritten for each specific job again. They are scraping Indeed, those tools, and they are scraping LinkedIn. So just by having your jobs there, you'll be overwhelmed with effortless applications. And this is something we definitely don't want. So I think now it's time to start being, instead of just using tools like Indeed, who have a huge reach, but we want to be pinpricking, just using those small tools which will be reaching out to the right audience. And I think given the current development, in the end it will be a good thing. But now the breakup will be hard. And in fact, we should have invited someone from Indeed to talk about this. They probably wouldn't have shown up. But I know some people at Indeed, which I kind of like. My personal contacts at Indeed Belgium, they really tried their best for me. And now
we have a lot of Indeed former employees as well. They're great. Mostly
the former employees. But now I have to call my account manager at Indeed and say, I'm sorry, Peter, and I really like you and you tried hard, but given the situation, we won't be able to work with you anymore. No. And he will understand, but he won't be able to get his bonus because of this.
Well, will House of HR have a divorce party? Because I want to be at that.
Yeah.
If there's a party, we're there. So every reason to have a party is good reason. So divorce parties are just our thing.
So I have maybe a dumb question, but the question around the organic versus paid, did we ever straighten that one out? So what is it that has been becoming forbidden now? Is it part of the recruitment staffing agencies that are forbidden, or is it the agencies, media agencies in between, and the programmatic players?
They all started with just, in the beginning, everything was organic, and they just wanted the biggest job database. So they scraped everything. They had all the jobs, and then they needed to make some money. So they contacted companies like ours and said, okay, instead of having all of your jobs listed for free, you have to pay for at least a part of them, which was fair. But then suddenly they announced they stopped scraping. They won't be scraping anymore. And I think, but that's my opinion, it's just because you can't scrape people's jobs and then use the traffic they generate to give to your own clients. It would be illegal. So now they said, okay, we won't be scraping you anymore. And if you want your jobs mentioned on the side of Indeed, you'll have to pay for them. But paying is definitely a consent. It's saying like, okay, I know I will be listed on Indeed because I pay for it. And they forced every applicant to create a profile. So they have all the information. And if they use my jobs to attract new candidates, those new candidates will be creating profiles, and they'll be using those profiles to match with their own clients. And that's basically the whole idea, I think. Using the traffic generated by my vacancies or by our vacancies to attract clients they can match up with their own, to attract candidates they can match up with their own clients.
And what's you guys' point of view when it comes to what the industry refers to active versus passive candidates? So in this case, we could call it total addressable market, meaning how do we tap into the entire universe of actual workforce? Like how do we not only, approach active job seekers, but also the ones who's currently hired? What's your standpoint here?
I've always hated that active passive because it's a spectrum. It's not a category.
And it could also be a timing question. Like
very much so. Everybody's active at the time that they're looking, when their boss is yelling at you, when you're about to be laid off. I think the bigger thing is people forget how cheap advertising is, especially in a pay-per-click model. The point of a pay-per-click model, it's incredibly cheap as an auction on day one and incredibly expensive as you have more competitors. It's always going to go up because that's just, it's how the model's built. It's how Google and Facebook became two of the biggest companies in the world. The idea of going out and finding the right niches is more expensive. Sourcing has always been more expensive as a cost per hire than advertising. Outbound's more expensive than inbound, always has been. The more that inbound becomes expensive, the more likely you are to chase, because sourcing's faster, it's more targeted, you're wasting less time. So the more we understand the true cost of hire, what it costs for an individual to do it, your software to do reach outs, the actual comparisons, once you actually know how much it costs, which goes back to people analytics, sourcing begins to make more sense because you're not wasting all this time. When it's just cheap, easy traffic, you don't really care. I'll just get another 100 people that are in place. So I think what's really happening is it gets more expensive, and it's projected to get more expensive. Cost per hire will continue to rise up. In fact, that's why I was fine with cost per application. It made sense. I think Indeed's mistake when they did it was to try to tell everybody the way you're going to fix this is you have to hire a bunch of admins to fix the way that you post jobs and talk to people. Like you can't just tell someone you have to hire more people in your TA department and traffic's getting more expensive. But it is where everybody's going. So, I mean, that is the key, is it goes back to conversion. So as those costs begin to mirror, it makes more sense to look for different options, to look for sourcing and go, I'd rather talk to the 10 right people than get 1,000 people in knowing 95% of them are total waste of time because they clicked on lazy apply. And when you look at the math of that, everybody doesn't have to use lazy apply. If 5-10% of the candidates are out there using lazy apply, they have half of the resumes in existence. You just can't function with that. And AI won't solve it because it's AI generated resumes talking to AI matching algorithms, which is just one big blur of average. So now you've got this problem of you have to go back to people talking to each other, which is very, very expensive. So I think as we understand the numbers better, we'll be able to make better decisions. Right now, we're just kind of in a confusion. It's more who's yelling at us versus what's the actual, who's actually doing best in terms of how much a cost per hire should be. I think that's our issue right now is we don't know our own numbers. So we tend to pivot wildly, whether it's slashing half of our staff, hiring headhunters, buying an ATS that's going to be the silver bullet that cures everything in your future state. I think we're still seeing a lot of those things occur.
Yeah.
Well, I think resumes now, if they haven't been before, they definitely are now. They're pretty much going to be worthless because when you have something that's tailored against a job posting by AI that don't even meet your skills and or abilities, you're going to have to focus on screening and also performance-driven types of technologies. I mean, that's going to be the key. If you can't prove that you can do these or have these skills, perform these tasks, et cetera, then you're not going to be a qualified lead. And then that is how tech companies should be looking at taking that PPC into that next level. Instead of paying, a $1 a click, you're going to pay, $50 for a qualified candidate, or maybe 500, depending on obviously the scale and the type of person that you're trying to get to. So I think as Lieven had said, I think this is good because it's actually pushing the conversation further and hopefully a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Because obviously HR is not quick to adopt, but when you have these things thrown in your face, you get mud thrown in your face, you tend to retaliate, and hopefully it's a good retaliation.
And I also think that we can learn from other industries a lot still. So if you look at take e-commerce as an example, right? If you go into an ad online, that e-commerce store, especially if you put something in the basket, right, will follow you.
Oh yeah.
Everywhere, and they will nurture you slowly with the influencers, and they will
Give you discount.
If it's like a shirt or something, it will probably close you down within like 72 hours.
Oh
If
yeah,
it's
I will.
Or maybe they nurture you for 3 months or 6 months. If it's a house, maybe even longer, or a trip to Bahamas or whatever, right? But it's very few times I've met TA managers that really knows how even remarketing and retargeting works, right? I still need to educate them. And like, oh, wow, this is super cool. So they can press this link. If a recruiter sends an email, they press the link, I can retarget them for 6 months. Yes, you can. Wow, this is really cool. But that technology is 20 years old now. So, and I don't understand why.
Yeah, but the problem is recruitment has been done by HR, and affiliate marketing and those links and retargeting is marketing, and those people just don't talk to each other.
No, they're not serving the same personas, but they are, but they aren't. Yeah. Super interesting. Can I just ask for everyone's, if we were to predict, like where are we going with all of this? What do you foresee in a future that we cannot see, obviously, but what do you guys predict this shift is taking us? If we're wrapping up with everyone's 1-2 predictions of how this is like becoming this seismic shift that you talked about, Chad. If we start with you, Jim, what's your predictions?
I have 2. One, I think that people analytics becomes the most important thing, because once you have that data, you can make good decisions. And there's no way that the boards, knowing how important, you don't have people, you can't grow. That's what it comes down to. And unfortunately, we tend to focus on our KPIs and traffic instead of the business outcomes. People analytics allows us to focus on outcomes to say, hey, I need these 1,000 people or I can't grow the market next year. They're going to force us to do that. And once we begin to see those numbers, now we can make good decisions, and we're not captive to vendors. We're not captive to one giant. It's, hey, we're making the good decisions. And by the way, we have made, it's not that recruitment's broken. We fix these things all the time. It's just that we continuously have to refix them over and over. We're not good at sustaining some of that progress. We know what to do once we get the numbers and actually know what our total costs are, who's doing what, where the problems are, where our true source of hire comes from. That'll make a big difference for us. But the other thing is something that Indeed talked about when they, I think it was Steve Rothberg mentioned the other day. If they can fix an end-to-end solution, if they can get candidates, and because we're seeing some of that, some of the European companies as well, where they're bringing candidates in, they're doing the assessments, they're tying directly into the ATS, they're never letting them out. They're not sending traffic to a career site where 95% of the people bounce. They're saying, I'm going to give you the candidate. They never leave your job board. They're just automatically hired. That's a big deal. I think what Indeed was talking about is not just the flex part, but for the staffing part, if they can control everything that's happening end to end, they can go to the company and saying, you were spending $4,000 for cost per hire. We can bring that down to $2,000, but we want 800 of it rather than $80. So I think that was part of them talking about increasing the take. So if they could solve that, that could be a big deal for regular staffing firms, because their whole point is we're going to bring your costs down and we want more of it. I think that's what they want to accomplish. I don't think it's possible, but I think that's where they're going to be focused.
That's systems though.
Growth.
Yeah, the systems though. Indeed's been trying to go down funnel for years. Their pixels, all the shit that just didn't work, right? It just didn't work. This is forcing it. This is forcing it to happen in their contained system as, again, and they have control because they're staffing. So I've got, I don't want to say 2 predictions, but I'm going to say that, Lieven was talking about, hopefully, there'd be kind of like a staffing kumbaya moment where you can get some of the staffing companies where they come together and they can kind of, I don't see that happening. Unfortunately, They should, but I don't see that happening. What I do see happening though for the staffing community, and this is a little insight because I've got some insider information, that there's going to be a very big staffing tech acquisition that's happening in the next few days. And that's going to be not in direct response, but almost in direct response to this news. I think the way that this happens and this comes together is you have to have a vehicle to be able to bring the staffing organizations together, and it's going to be tech, right? And I think that is a great opportunity. So that's my prediction to some extent, knowing that there's some big acquisitions coming in the very near future.
Interesting.
Wow.
I've got a perfect name for it, Chad.
What's the name?
Recruit.com. I'm not kidding. I know the people who purchased that. It was purchased by Snelling and HireQuest, and they have that. They could absolutely lead the revolution with that.
There you go. And there you go, Lieven. You can have hire.com.
Hire.com. Why not?
Recruiting.com. Recruiter.com. I'm sure they're all available.
We already agreed on calling it absolutely.com, right?
Oh.
Indeed. Absolutely.
There we
Absolutely.
go. What's your prediction, Lieven?
It's difficult, of course, but I think we have now a great new technology accessible to us, LLMs and everything which concerns it. And I think the shift with Indeed, and Indeed isn't even that important, it's just one inflow channel. It's going to force us to be even more creative and to... We always say at House of HR, if it doesn't exist and we need it, we invent it ourselves, we build it ourselves. This is what's going to be happening right now. What's happening right now? We're going to be using the new technology and figure out some new ways to reach out to the candidates, to get the best candidates. And time will tell, and it won't be that much time.
Very interesting to see the option here for social media as well. What's your Viktor?
Yeah, so I think this will actually force the rec and staff firms to fix their basics. And by fixing the basics, I mean they need to fix the candidate experience, conversion rates. They need to understand remarketing, retargeting as anyone else. They need to do even more source of candidates coming in. But they, as you mentioned as well, Chad, they also need to be held accountable for their large budgets, because they have large budgets. Like, they have huge budgets. So their leaders need to be on top and putting demands in now. Like, if we're going to do this investment, we need to know the exact amount of hires coming out of it. And if they solve their basics, which they haven't been that interested in solving before, they will get huge advantages, because they already sit on the majority of the candidates. So they just need to leverage that one.
Interesting. So we're currently in such an interesting time. It will be so cool to see how this takes us, how this elevates the entire industry into more efficient, more inclusive, more strategic talent attraction. And I mean, watch this space. We don't know. We don't have the answers. We'll just keep following Jim and Lieven and Chad and Cheese, and make sure to be always on top of the problems and everything shaping the industry. Super cool. Well,
I'm here for that.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for giving us an insight into how you are monitoring and following this big shift. And let's keep the conversation going. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
Super
Yeah,
cool.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.